Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you do not know who I am, my name is Ed. I'm a Melbourne-based photographer, videographer, and small business digital marketer. Today we're going to be going through mobile photography and videography, where I'm going to take you guys through the essentials for creating better photos and videos right here with your mobile. Hey team, future Ed here. I've actually edited up the full video that I was originally intending to release, but what I've realized is that these theories are going to be extremely applicable to beginner photographers and videographers anyway. So if you are looking to get the full sort of basics of ISO, shutter speed, and aperture and what they do, this is a video for you. If you are a mobile shooter, guys, I'm going to go through ISO and shutter speed first really quick. To give you guys what you need, and you won't need to tune in for that last little bit. So anyway guys, enjoy the video. See you at the end. We've got several different sections to go through over this series, guys. So I will try and split it up into photo and video, but some theories do just apply to both across the board. First things first, and what we're going to go through today, guys, will be manual mode. Now, for many of you, manual mode will be a foreign concept on your phone. You as a creative can take full control over what your phone does and how it is reacting to the light and the scene. When you're in automatic or photo and video mode, everything you're doing is automatic and determined by the phone. Now, this can be great in some circumstances, but generally most photographers or professional photographers will always shoot manual mode because it gives you more control over the scene. It will allow you to highlight what you want to highlight and show off what you want to show off in the scene and just give you more creative control. Part two will be lighting, guys, one of the most important things when it comes to photo and video. Now, lighting a scene is probably one of the biggest differences between amateur photography and professional photography. You would be amazed what you can create on your phone with a good lighting setup. In that video, guys, we're going to go over budget lighting setups, how to light a scene, what different lighting effects have on a subject, and I'm going to go through both a human subject and a static subject. So for those of you looking to do product photography or more fashion photography, I'll be able to help you guys out with whatever you need. So lighting is super important. We will cover both photography and videography for that because it is essentially one in the same when you are lighting a scene. Obviously there are more things you need to be aware of in terms of movement with a camera if you are using video, but more or less for your basic photography and videography needs, lighting is essentially just a couple of key principles and you should be good to go. Now, next one is just video specific, and that is going to be audio. Now, a lot of you guys are doing live streams at the moment, Instagram Live, Zoom meetings, or to connect with your customers and your client base. A recent study showed that bad audio was more disruptive to a user experience than bad video. So what that means is if you've got great quality video, but you've got really shit quality audio, a lot of people are going to be zoning out really quickly and disengaging with your content. With that, we're going to show you guys different tools to create more engaging audio with your audiences and get crisper, cleaner audio so you can be heard and your message can be heard nice and clear. Then we'll go through the music subscription services that I use as a creator and a professional videographer to get high quality professional music for your videos, whether you want to use that in the background or you want to create a really nice punchy piece to promote your business. High quality audio is extremely important for your videos. Another video will be composition. Now, one of the most important things in terms of creating engaging scenes is composition, how to structure a photo or a video to make it more engaging for the audience and to sort of lead their eye. Last two pieces, guys, will both be editing. Now, editing is probably one of the things where photography and videography really differentiate. There are some key principles to an edit in terms of telling a story through your edit, but the way you go about it with photography and videography is very different. What we're going to do is do a part one, which will be our photography, and I'm going to take a few photos and show you guys how I would edit them using the lighting techniques we've used and how to create different looks with color manipulation, sharpness, and detail to create engaging photos for you. Then part two will be specifically for video. Now, video editing for me is a lot more in-depth and a lot trickier to pull off. I think when you are creating an image for photography, you know whether the image is good or bad when you've started. When you're creating a video, you might have a hint that something would work, but you don't really know till you get into the editing software. I'm going to show you guys the techniques I use to create engaging content and editing softwares that I use, how to edit, how to tell a story through your editing, and how to engage an audience through editing, because bad editing or stuff that doesn't really flow can disengage an audience again. So last piece, guys, will just be a general Q&A of questions I've got from my audience and my clients about how to create better content on their mobile. Let's get into manual mode. When we are creating content, really important that we shoot in manual mode. The reason being is basically control. The more control you have over the scene through your phone is better for you as a creator. Manual mode might be a scary concept for you as a new creative, but it is the best way to shoot. There's two main things that you can control in your phone that will make the biggest difference in your content quality as you are going forward. Number one is your shutter speed. Shutter speed is basically the time in which it takes for the shutter in front of your sensor to close and then open back up again. Now, shutter speed is measured by a fraction of a second. So 1/100 means it's going to be 1/100th of a second opening and closing. This speed, depending on your phone, can go from 1/4000th all the way up to 15 seconds, leaving the shutter open. The longer the shutter is open, the more light that can be let into this scene, the brighter the image. The lower the shutter means the less light that will be let in the scene, and then the darker it will be. Why would we want to shoot with a low shutter speed? Because like I mentioned before, it will help you brighten your images. This is one caveat that comes with shooting with a really slow shutter speed. While you might get more light in your scene, you can also get this effect called motion blur. While your shutter is opening, it is reading the full scene for the whole time that your shutter is open. So if someone moves, your shutter is going to register that movement, but it's going to sort of paint across the screen where that hand movement has been. So if we look at these two photos side by side, we've got one photo where the shutter speed is very high and you can see there's no motion blur. If we look at this other shot, we can see that there is motion blur because you can see I've opened up the shutter, which has created this motion blur effect, which has muddied up the image and I can't quite see the product properly. So how do we work around it? What happens if we're in a dark room where we need to open up our shutter to let more light in and shoot at those lower sort of shutter speed values like 1/10, 1/5. How do we shoot with those sorts of values, getting a nice bright image without getting motion blur in our photos? Simple answer is, guys, is just a tripod. If you got something that's like a food photo or a general product shot on a basic background where there's no movement, you can just set up your phone or your camera on a tripod to help you, to stop you from shaking the camera and creating any sort of movement in the scene. Now this one with a tripod is much cleaner, much crisper, and you can really see the image. Now this one over here, without the tripod, you can see there's that motion blur and it doesn't look very good. That is shutter speed, guys. Now, last thing, guys, is ISO or ISO value. This is the only other way without adding more light to your scene that you can alter the amount of light that your sensor is reading. What ISO is basically how sensitive your sensor is to the incoming light in your scene. If we look here, guys, as we move the ISO up on my phone, you can see the scene is getting brighter and brighter. Now, as we increase our ISO in our images or our videos, guys, you're gonna see that grain is going to increase. The reason why this is a problem is it is gonna sort of degrade some of the colors and degrade the overall image quality. You can save a little bit of this in your post-processing through the editing that we'll go through later, but you do not want to push it too far. Doesn't matter if you're shooting on a mobile, if you're shooting on a professional camera, whatever you're shooting on, if you push the ISO too far, you are gonna create a muddy, yucky images. For phones, unfortunately, they don't have great ISO sensitivity, so they will degrade the images quite quickly. So you might be able to get away with 400 to 800 ISO in your images, but anything above that, it is going to start degrading the images. Thanks, Past Ed. All right, back to me. So aperture. Aperture is the last thing that you need to know about in terms of the 3 ways you can influence light on your camera. So every lens has a diaphragm in it that opens and closes to let more or less light in. Often hear terms like fast lenses, which are lenses with lower aperture like f1.4. It can be a little bit confusing when you're starting because the lower aperture's f1.4 let in more light. Higher the aperture is, it lets in less light. I know for me, when I was starting, that was a little bit confusing because I was like, wouldn't the lower apertures let in less light, low and low, rather than low and high with a low aperture letting in more light? But by opening up the aperture, we can let more light into our camera. Now, pairing that with what we know about ISO and shutter speed does give you a little bit of flexibility in terms of the amount of light that's letting into your camera. Now, the tricky thing with f-stop is it has 2 effects on your image. One, it does let more light in, like I explained before, but the more open the aperture is, the shallower the depth of field is. What depth of field is basically how much is in focus in your image. So if you've got a really shallow depth of field, you're gonna have less in focus in your image. There will be a smaller focal range for your camera. Whereas if you're shooting at a higher f-stop, something like f8 or f11, you're gonna have a very deep depth of field, which means a large segment of the image will be in focus. Those f1.4s are those razor thin sort of f-stops that you see that really isolate a subject. So lower f-stops are generally awesome for isolating a subject. If you want to record a whole scene and make sure you're getting everything into it, maybe you're into street photography, maybe you're into landscape, you generally want to shoot at a higher f-stop. That is a really, really quick look at aperture, guys. This is not by any means the most in-depth analysis of it. I don't really know that much about the physics behind aperture because it is much more complicated than ISO and shutter speed. So there are a couple of great videos out there that I will link down below to explain in depth about aperture and how it affects the image and how you guys can use it to manipulate your images and your scene. So we're gonna go back to Future Red for a wrap up, and I'll see you again soon. So there you have it, guys. That is the basics of manual mode. The reason, again, why we avoid automatic mode, just because it doesn't have the creative brain that we do in our minds. So you might be having a completely different idea to what your phone has in terms of what you're shooting and how you're shooting it. So it's important to shoot manual mode. So I'll see you guys in the next one where we are going to go through lighting for your photos and videos. Cheers.